Fire Force is a show I'm not particularly sure how to describe. On the surface, whenever I thought about its world, its characters, the overarching plot, or the events unfolding on my screen, I felt that this was supposed to be a generic fantasy world with generic shonen-esque tropes, and a story that I had already experienced multiple times in the past. But if that was the case, one thing I couldn't explain was why it had me so captivated with its premise, why I was getting attached to these characters, or why was I waiting every week with anticipation for the next episode to start airing. With these questions in mind, I started to think and really think about Fire Force, and today I want to talk about why it is a show that is definitely worth your time. The premise of Fire Force is simple. Due to a worldwide disaster that occurred 250 years ago, humans now live under the constant threat of suddenly combusting into flames and turning into what is known as a flame person, a mindless and highly aggressive monster capable of wreaking havoc amidst normal people due to the ability of these monsters to control fire. I say normal people because, along with the appearance of flame persons, a new kind of human also came into existence. Special people with pyrokinetic powers, that is, flame manipulation and extremely high heat tolerance. And it is these superhumans who join in special fire brigades, organizations with the task of fighting the flame persons, protecting life and property in the new Tokyo Empire, one of the only places in the entire world where human society still thrives. I feel that one of the reasons Fire Force stands out in its early chapters is because of how death is portrayed as an integral part of the fight against the Infernals. The author, Atsushi Okubo, previously worked in the series Soul Eater, and in an interview he expressed he was fatigued of this series' particularly light-hearted approach to death, striving to make this a especially important part in Nen no Shibutai. The passing away of people in the manga and subsequently the anime have a real sense of weight to them, the leader of the 8th Brigade, Akitaru Obi, embodying this concept especially in the early chapters. We're straight up told that when a human transforms into a flame person, it is considered as dead by society, and the job of special fire brigades is not to extinguish the flames, that job relegated to the fire corps, but to engage in combat with the Infernals. The prayers that the members of these brigades chant before performing an execution accentuating these events as something tragic, and we are often forced to get into the perspective of the family members of these people, portraying that way the loss of a loved one and spreading the terror lingering throughout the first part of the series. That being that every human can spontaneously combust into flames and nobody can know when, why, or how to stop it. While we're in the topic of flame humans, I think that the way we're introduced to them is particularly great, and to illustrate my point, let's take a look at the first 3 Infernals we encounter. Already in the first panels of the manga, we can already see the role that these monsters play in the story. This man is riding the train, nothing particularly interesting here, until a trail of smoke starts to leave his mouth, and on the next page, the smoke has turned into raging flames. Our protagonist gets to the scene of the fire and the flame person starts leaving the train and just look at it. First, we are presented with the chaos and this disaster is causing. Then we are directed to the nervous expression of Shinra. And then we can finally see it. The flame human is almost a straw man, extremely thin, with elongated arms and legs, hollow eyes and an uncanny mouth with irregular, oddly shaped teeth. There is really not much to this. This is dangerous, flame humans seem to be aggressive, and the way they move and react to the environment reminds us of a mindless wild animal. The second flame human that we encounter is a little bit more interesting. As soon as our main cast enters the building in which the monster is contained, we are immediately treated to a double-page spread of the view in the structure, and take a note on how the panel is composed. Our main protagonist Shinra is shot from below, letting us glance at the ceiling and the sea of flames that surrounds the scene. Shinra occupying just enough of the frame for us to make out the expression in his face, but still is just a tiny figure compared to the space reserved for the environment. The vertical lines of the walls slanting due to the forced perspective and guiding us to a focal point far in the distance, making it look like the roof is far apart from our characters. Turning the page, we find the first human casualty of the story, a burnt body with a face contorting in pain. No other features can even be recognized. With just a double page and the subsequent panels, we are provided with so much information. That both the scene of the fire and the flame person are extremely hostile, and because we see how the flames envelop the characters, we are told that escape is not an option. They need to engage in combat. It is only when we are face to face with this same creature that something becomes apparent. This flame human is not like the one we've seen before, and it is much more intimidating, much more powerful, but the most important of all, it has a conscience of its own. Here we start to see my favorite characteristic about these monsters. They may not be that mindless. With this setup in mind, it is the third flame person that really serves to push the idea that death is more than just being defeated in a fight in this series. This time, the fight originates from a single family home, and arriving at the scene we meet the daughter of the flame person that, having lost his mom 2 years ago and now his dad, both to the flames, is shaken and terrified that this fate will soon come to herself. When entering the house though, the scene turns quiet, and where we expect to see flames and in the middle of the chaos a terrible creature, there is only emptiness. Our expectations subverted when the flame person this time is sitting quietly, even welcoming the group on their arrival. All the sense of danger and aggression from the last flame human we encounter is banished in an instant, instead filling the panels with a sense of sadness and stillness. And when the flame human is taken care of, the only thing that escapes his mouth on his dying breath is the name of her daughter. Instead of being a fight for survival, this encounter is closely compared to a slaughter. A tragic event where an innocent person just happened to meet the worst fate imaginable, and while still maintaining consciousness, endured unmeasurable pain to protect the ones they loved. It makes us think if there can be a different ending to these infernals, but ultimately, the result ends up being the same every time. It is easy to see how these three encounters differ from one another, but the takeaway from all of them is practically the same. No matter how these monsters are, they can maintain consciousness or not, they can be a threat or be completely inoffensive, all of them must be taken care of and eliminated. It doesn't matter what they are, it only matters that they are potentially dangerous and that they are no longer human. On the opposite side of the flame persons we have the actual characters, the members of each brigade and their unique personalities, and it is here where it's notable how talented and experienced Atsushi Okubo is at drawing manga. In a world where everyone is limited to have abilities that utilize fire, it is incredible how many distinct characters is he able to properly establish and realize inside this world. Take our main protagonist Shinra. Him, being a third-generation pyrokinesis user, has the special ability to create flames from the sole of his feet, using the power of combustion to propel himself. In turn, his combat style consists mainly of kicks and utilizing speed to outmatch his opponents, and his design reflects this. The first full-bodied shot of Shinra draws attention to his legs in comparison to his torso, and the uniform he wears has a unique design with pants shorter to not get reduced to ashes. Opposite to Shinra, the commander of the 8th, Akitaru Obi, has no fire manipulation abilities, and to compensate this, Obi trained his body restlessly for years, giving him a bulky and well-defined muscles, with a much wider back that hints us that his greatest asset is his upper body strength. When he puts on his working attire, this design makes all the more sense, as he has to carry more than 20 kilograms of equipment to every mission in order to keep up with his pyrokinetic peers, making him look totally like an defensive force in a brigade of mainly attack-oriented characters. While I think that the cast of the 8th Brigade will have interesting and effective designs, I think it is when we leave the limited scope of our main cast that we discover some of the most unusual and fascinating characters of the whole series, a favorite of mine being the Joker.
I'm the Joker, baby!
The Joker is first introduced at the end of chapter 3, and since the first look we take at him, he is surrounded with an aura of mystery and intrigue. The first season of the series does an amazing job at establishing the Joker as this loose cannon, an agent of chaos with motives so far ahead that we cannot yet comprehend, and a strength on par with the strongest characters we have seen so far. In chapter 33 we get this amazing shot of him, a full body shot of the Joker that I feel reflects so much about the character itself. Notice how his posture is slouched, with shoulders and arms reaching down as far as they would go, elongating the proportions to make his arm look massive and menacing, while the lower portion of the body is slanted and crouching in an unnatural position, more akin to a satyr, mythological creatures known as drunkards and molesters. In tandem with the always lit smoke hanging from his mouth and the bandana covering his left eye, the Joker gives an unsightly impression, neither human nor inhuman. Most characters in Nen no Shabutai have recognizable designs, but I think it is the ability of Okubo to twist and deform the character's expression in order to make them appear more demonic and menacing that gives us some of the most iconic panels. We see this with a lot of the cast, but the obvious example of this is Shinra's grin earning him the nickname of Devil. But this is not the only instance of this occurring. Captain Hibana's face is often drawn in unnatural sharp angles and close-ups to bring focus to her flower-shaped pupils. The Joker's enormous smile makes him look deranged and unstable. Maki's face is able to show extreme fits of rage, and my personal favorite, the rare instances where Dr. Giovanni's collected persona shatters, showing his anger and the panels get distorted and freakish. Almost like even the manga itself reacts accordingly to his demands. Until this point, I mostly have discussed Fire Force through the perspective of its manga, and while I sprinkled fragments of animation here and there, I have yet to state my opinion about the anime adaptation aired in 2019. And to put it short, I would say Fire Force anime is a masterclass in what an adaptation should be. It perfectly portrays the events of the manga while playing to the strengths of animation. And to illustrate my point, I want to talk about one of the earliest fights in the series, the battle between Joker and Shinra in episode 3. This fight takes place in the middle of the newcomer tournament, where our characters are tasked to enter a pretend scene of the fire and rescue the victims inside. But when Shinra gets atop the building using his fire recognition ability, he is met with the unconscious bodies of several fire brigade members, knocked out by the Joker. And from this point, we can see some important details that I think elevate that scene from the manga to a greater degree. In the manga, the environment where the fight takes place is cluttered and the objects are all clear and well defined. In some shots, it looks like our characters are standing in a narrow corridor filled with machinery and debris, so it is only natural that the start of the fight feels claustrophobic and like the movement of both parties is impaired by the environment around them. In the anime, this same scenery is dark and expansive, making it a more suitable arena for a display of Shinra's flashier moves, while still maintaining that same feeling of claustrophobia due to the characters being surrounded by darkness. I also don't think I can give enough praise to the outstanding use of color and light effects the show constantly throws at us the viewers, often contrasting intense bursts of reds, orange and yellows, with flashes of whites and blacks, rounded by the faint glow of the iconic blue lines in the Special Fire Brigade's uniforms. Incredible animation, expansive backgrounds, and rapid bursts of intense colors are definitely strong points in the anime, but this would all fall flat in an instant if the sounds and music of the series weren't on par with the rest of the show. Luckily for us, the sound design is superb and the scenes where rapid action takes place feel like exhilarating classes of immense forces, due to the weight and immersion that David Studios cram in Fire Force's sounds. Take the scene we talked about earlier of the counter with the second flame person, and just feel how the sound of jet engines pushes Shinra's kick to convey the speed and power behind this move. Also, I couldn't find a way to organically introduce this scene in the script as I haven't double matched in the events of the series past episode 3, but I find it pretty funny how one of the greatest displays of animation till this point in the series is Tamaki bawling her eyes out. At this point I have talked on and on about what makes the series fantastic and why I consider you should definitely pick it up, but I wouldn't feel comfortable if all I looked at was all light and no shadows, so now is an appropriate time to acknowledge some of Enen Shobutai's shortcomings. As of the end of Season 1, our main cast of characters haven't been properly developed, with the exception of Captain Henawa, Vulcan or even Licht. Shinra as a protagonist has a lot going for it, but because at the beginning of the series his motivations are so clear and his personality is quickly established, the actual character that we follow for the next 90 chapters doesn't have a lot of room for growing. Aside from the obvious power escalation that comes in every shonen series, the protagonist that acts as the lenses we see the world through still has a lot of potential that has not been realized yet. Arthur, the rival of Shinra, is still limited to just that, the dim-witted rival archetype to our protagonist. And even though we do get some insight as to how his abilities work and hints as to how he might evolve in the scenes where his abilities get to shine, the first 24 episodes that we spent with him in the first season make him a bit of a dull character, although that is a problem that will surely get resolved in the second season, if you're not reading ahead in the manga, both for Shinra and Arthur. One problem that I really think has to be addressed on its own is the mistreatment of Tamaki in both the manga and the anime. The first appearance we see of her in chapter 5 make this very clear. From page 1 we are already directed to her as, "Hey guys, you wanna see some boobs, am I right?" and the treatment of her character is downhill from there. By the end of the chapter, Shinra has already groped her boobs, the usual trip and grope trope with Arthur, and got Shinra's hands down her pants, telling us that all of this is because of her lucky loot syndrome. A cheap excuse for providing fan service without having to properly establish a scene where it would feel natural. But this gimmick is most of the time taken extremely far and to a distasteful degree. No example of this clearer than the battle between Shinra and Reka Hoshimiya, where the action is stopped to a halt just to see how Tamaki, a character that is not even involved in the fight, gets her clothes burnt off and Shinra is repeatedly flung towards her. And this is a shame, because I see Tamaki as a character with so much potential and much more to prove. Due to her airheaded personality, she fits right in with the trio of newcomers to the 8th Brigade, and this leads to some really entertaining bantering between them, especially with Shinra. On top of that, Tamaki does not get a lot of time to shine in the events of the first season, but between scenes of awfully placed fanservice and gratuitous nudity, we are able to catch glimpses of a character that has an extremely strong sense of justice, the desire to prove oneself as a person capable to save lives, and the will to protect the one she cares the most about. All of this with the innocence and adorable experience that only a young newcomer like Tamaki can provide. Sadly, a lot of people are not going to notice this trace just based on the events of the first season alone, and I wouldn't blame you if, because of the excessive fan service, you find Tamaki a tedious and lackluster character and a little hard to see through her scenes. Overall, I think Fire Force is a bit generic of a shonen battle series, one that I couldn't help but to get drawn into and that I kept coming back time and time again to experience the adventures of Shinra and the 8th Brigade. With an outstanding visual department and a story that was enjoyable from the moment I picked it up to this day, and one that I know will keep me entertained for many more months to come. One thing that I feel important to mention now is that with the announced retirement of Okubo from drawing manga in mid-2020, and the statement that Fire Force is near his impending finale, now is the best time to pick up Fire Force in any way you prefer, manga or anime, with the story coming to a close in the pages of the manga, but the second season of the anime airing this summer of 2020, with the promise that the series will have an ending without much delay. Something that for me, more than 220 chapters in, is a reassuring thought to know we will get to the end of the journey with the characters I've grown to love. If by any chance this video convinced you to experience the story for yourself, I'm glad that was the case and I hope you have a great time while doing so. And if you are wondering what medium should you decide to experience it, while I think that the manga is definitely a fantastic read, the anime is much easier to consume, and the superb adaptation of David Studios, filled with so many talented voice actors like Gakuto Kajiwara, Kazuya Nakai and Aoi Yuki, make for an incredibly immersive watch and a thrilling experience from start to finish. It also helps that the opening and ending both slap. Well, that's all I have to say on Fire Force for now. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and well, a comment, a like would be really much appreciated. It's the first video on the channel and I really enjoyed making it. It was a lot of work to make. I originally planned to release it when the second season of the anime started airing, but because it took a lot of time, I just couldn't. But well, it was really enjoyable to write the script and to record the lines and to edit it. To see how it all came together, it was really an amazing experience, so well, I'm really looking forward for next time. Until then.